live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com. This is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Well, hi there. Obviously, I am not Lowell Green. Lowell was on for a moment, and his computer apparently has kicked him off. So Lowell will be along with us shortly, but I wanted to let you know that, in fact, Lowell is here with us today. Hope you had a great long Thanksgiving weekend. I keep telling myself that this is actually Tuesday and not Monday, because it's very, very confusing. Let's talk about the podcast. Should you ever miss an episode, I invite you to check out the Lowell Green podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Apple has it, Google, Spotify as well. And on your smart speaker, all you have to do is ask it to play the Lowell Green podcast. Just that simple. Your calls to the show are welcome. Here is the number, 613-413-2217. Again, 613-413-2217. We also stream the show via video, where you can post your comments on 3 different Facebook platforms, that being The Lowell Green, Milkman Show, and BTR Radio. Also, twitch.tv/BTR Radio. You can chat and watch and listen there. And we are on youtube.com/Blast the Radio. And yes, we're in a bit of a middle of a name change as well, from Blast the Radio to BTR Radio, but both will work to get you to the show. As we wait for the arrival of one Lowell Green, again, the number here, 613-413-2217. Lowell at blasttheradio.com. Let me see. Food comments from last week's show. This is a leftover from last week's show. We'll get this in while we wait. Bill in Ottawa says, Lowell and Pierre. I'm not Pierre, but okay. Please talk more about the Prime Minister's grocery bill. It's between $10,000 and $12,000 a month, and he's hardly ever at home. Well, Lowell has certainly addressed that. Oh, my gosh. We've actually got a phone call coming in. Hi, it's the Lowell Green Show. I'm not Lowell Green, and neither are you. Who's this, please?
It's your friend, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
How are you doing?
Chris calling in to help me vamp on the Lowell Green Show. Chris Fraser, what is on your mind today, good sir? And thank you for bailing me out. I owe you one.
No problem. No, I want to say, I'm really thankful for the work that you and Lowell do on this show. It's a half an hour of informative radio. I especially like this show he did last Friday or the Friday before, on the Reconciliation Day.
Right.
That was really brave, because very few broadcasters would actually speak out and say, why are we doing this, and question why it's happening. It's politically incorrect to even question things like that. So I thought that was a really brave episode.
You know what? And Chris, I mean, you've been on with the Nick and Joe show as a co-host. So, I mean, not the same thing applies to that show as to this one. But you don't get much time. Lowell and I don't get much time to talk before the show goes on. In fact, Lowell's still trying to get on right now. He's calling my other cell phone. So I never know what he's bringing to the show. Very, very, very rarely will I actually get a heads up. But you're right. And it's interesting for me, as someone coming from the music side of radio, to dive into this talk side and just follow how, I mean, I'm in the ring with the master when it comes to Lowell Green. Right. And to see that, he looks at stuff and asks those kinds of questions. It's a totally different view of the world than what I'm used to. It's really quite amazing. All right, Debbie's trying to get on via video chat. Chris, you want to talk and vamp for a minute here? Or should we? I don't know what to do here. I don't know, put the show on hold.
Well, if you have another caller,
well, no, Lowell's wife, I think, is trying to get through and just let me know what is going on. Maybe they got Lowell coming on via Facebook Live or something. I don't know what to do here. This is crazy. What are the big issues?
Share with you a little.
Go ahead.
I can share with you a little bit about my experience as a candidate, which will last for another couple weeks.
All right, and just a heads up, you are running in Orleans, Ward.
Yeah, Ward 2.
Thank
you. Orleans West Innis.
Okay. What's the big? Well, let me ask you, what are the big things when you go to people's doors? What are the big things that people are really upset about or want changed or fixed when it comes to municipal politics, Chris? What's the number one thing?
Yeah, there's so many different issues. I would say transit is a big one.
I would think.
People are, people who don't have cars especially want better transit. And I can understand that. I have a car, so I can get in and out fairly easily. But if you don't have a car, it can be a long wait at the bus stop in minus 30 degrees in the wintertime.
Yep.
Or plus 30 in the summertime for that reason.
That never happens.
And also the roads. That's always an issue. Every municipal election, people talk about the condition of the roads. And that's just, I guess, a Canadian thing. But it always comes up every election. The roads are terrible.
Chris, one of the things that I think, and Lowell and I have talked about this, so I'm curious to get your perspective as you're knocking on doors and campaigning, as many people are right now, people who put their name on the ballot, et cetera. What are, the big issues? I mean, do people really know the difference between city politics, provincial politics, and federal politics? Do they know what those divisions are? Do they know who's responsible for what?
Quite often they don't. And quite often I'll ask somebody, if they're not happy with things, I'll say, who is your current councillor? And they say they don't know.
Yeah.
Or they'll mention the MPP or the member of parliament, and I'll say very politely, no, that's not your councillor, that's your MP or your MPP. So I'm a bit of a political junkie, so I always know those things, but other people don't keep up to date with those things. And it's only around election time that they'll see signs and going, oh, who's that person? Who's that person? So I'm actually surprised at the number of people who do not know who my incumbent is.
Right.
It's really quite alarming.
Do they at least know who the mayor is?
They know the outgoing mayor.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Who he is. But as far as the mayoral candidates, I get asked a lot by people, who do you support for mayor? Because I'm not sure who I should support. And I give them my opinion. And that's interesting to talk about as well. But people tend to be kind of tuned out right until a week before election day. Then they start to kind of try to tune in. But,
we've got a question for you, as a matter of fact. So this is interesting. It's John Milkey filling in. Lowell is dealing with some computer issues. I think his computer just needs a restart. I think he leaves it on 24/7. And you know how computers every now and then, typically when you need it the most, it's just not ready for you. But this is interesting to get a question. And by the way, your questions are welcome on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. Same channels as always. Elias says, can you ask the candidate about incinerators and incineration, please? We cannot just keep dumping garbage in the garbage site. So what are your feelings on incinerators and incineration? Because Lowell certainly brought this up on several occasions.
I have heard Lowell talk about this for several years now. And I have to say, I agree with him. Like the high efficiency incineration, it seems to work in a few European countries, and I can't remember exactly which countries are doing it. I'll have to look that up. But to me, like, a lot of people think that the high incineration incinerators are pollutants, but they're not. Like they've as Lowell has explained on the show before, they are very efficient, and it's a great way of getting rid of garbage without filling the atmosphere. So it can be done, but it doesn't seem to be promoted by, especially the environmental groups here in Canada for some reason.
So what are your feelings on it? Is that something that you, as a councillor, would be in support of if the opportunity were to be there for us to move to garbage incineration? Pardon me?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea. But from what I've heard, it's a clean way of getting rid of waste.
One of the countries that does do this very well, Carrie, thank you for chiming in. She says it works very, very well in Sweden. So, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Anne wants to know why we have two bureaucracies in healthcare. If healthcare is a provincial responsibility, why do we need a federal health department? Want to speak to that? Again, you are, again, just for the listener and the viewer, Chris is a municipal candidate. So,
right.
But there's also a municipal component to our healthcare system, isn't there?
Of course. And we've been hearing about the problems with the ambulance service, and they call it level 0 when there are no more ambulances ready for service. And that is something that we never heard of years before. Level 0, no ambulance service. So there's something wrong with the system, or we maybe just don't have enough ambulance drivers or people in that field.
So, Chris, do you know, because to me, when I hear about the ambulance service, I think instantly that would be a provincial matter. But they are the Ottawa paramedic service. And I guess what is the chain of command, I guess is the term I'm looking for the city? Can the city make changes to the paramedic service, or does the city need to work with the province and demand those changes?
I think it's the city working with the province and city demanding that the province helps step up. Now, that doesn't absolve the city from all its obligations to improve the ambulance service, but the two levels of government do have to work together to make it a better system.
So Anne follows up and she says, this question is not for your caller, but for the show. Well, thanks. Chris happens to be the show right now. Lowell is, again, still having some issues getting on. I noticed that they've tried FaceTime. They've tried getting through as well on the phone, and are probably oblivious to the fact that I've carried on my own here doing the show. So I don't know what Lowell had planned today, but here we are. And as far as I know, Chris, feel free to correct me. Chris Fraser is a candidate in Orleans Ward 2. The federal government's responsibility is a portion of your federal taxes get doled out and divided up across the board for the provinces to put towards healthcare. So there's certainly an overall, and as we've seen through the pandemic, we have Dr. Theresa Tam. She is, federally responsible for healthcare protocols and et cetera, and bringing to light things like COVID-19 that we need to deal with, and then works with the provincial partners. But as far as I know, the bureaucracy level of it is some of your federal tax dollars get rolled back into the provinces, and it's a partnership, but the province is the one that ultimately runs it. Does that sound correct to you, Chris?
Yeah, and during every administration federally, we always have the premiers going back to the prime minister's office saying, we need more money for healthcare. And then the cities will go to the province and say, we need more money for healthcare as well. So it seems like every level of government is asking the other level of government for help. But you're right, during the pandemic, we did see how the federal government worked hand in hand with provincial governments to help them.
Right.
And it was interesting because some provinces, of course, handled the pandemic differently than other provinces. So it was interesting to see how each province handled that situation. The way that we handle things in Ontario was much different than BC, for example. So that's a good case study. It'll be interesting years from now to
yeah, I'd be interested to do something in a talk show format, in a multimedia format, to get the listener and viewer and just get a word out there again and just break it down, because I haven't had these conversations outside of this realm, but what level of government is responsible for what in our lives. And I think if people realized just how much the municipal politics really play a part in their day-to-day, like roads, bike lanes, transit system, et cetera, they would be much, much, much more engaged. Are you expecting a high voter turnout, Chris, or are you concerned that we're going to see pretty low numbers again come this election?
I think it depends a lot on the mayoral issue situation. Now with Jim Watson stepping away, and we have two or three strong contenders with Shirelli, Sutcliffe, and McKinney. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to make it very interesting. I think that that will probably entice people to come out to the polls in bigger numbers than last time.
Just because all eyes are on the mayoral race right now, you think?
Yeah, I think so. And some of the big issues, especially the environment, that people are going to be coming out to vote on those things. So I expect a larger turnout by, I'd say, anywhere between 5 to 10% higher than last time. I don't have the stats in front of me for last time. I can.
That's okay.
Look them up.
That's okay. I'm kind of putting you on the spot in a situation. In here I am in a situation where I've been kind of put on the spot today, unscripted, unplanned. Always relying on Lowell. I really, and it's funny. Today I actually did myself a favor. I had a little time. I actually flipped through the newspapers online, going, what are the potential subjects here that Lowell's going to bring up? So I'm sort of ready for anything. Regardless of who becomes mayor of Ottawa, that person is certainly going to be sitting at a table with a lot a lot of new counselors. That's got to be exciting too. Is that part of the inspiration or part of your motivation to get your name on the ballot there, Chris? And by the way, Chris Fraser is my guest right now, first caller through, so we're talking to him. He's my co-host on the Lowell Green Show with Not Lowell Green. Is that kind of the impetus for you putting your name on the ballot? Is that what excited you, or is this something that's sort of been something on the back of your mind for a while to do?
Well, it's not my first time running, but
okay, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I've run a couple of times, and both times were very different experiences. The first time I ran in 2010 against a very strong incumbent named Rainier Blois.
Yes.
And there were four of us running against him, and actually, that was a good experience. And I think I got like 1,400 votes during that election, and I was really surprised. Like, what? There's
That's awesome.
1,400 people out there that support me. So that was a bit of an ego boost.
All right, keep the comments rolling in on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter. Kellyanne, my opportunity now to go all Lowell Green on you. She says, "I think Ottawa is screwed." Kellyanne, what do you mean by that? Explain.
Yeah, what does that mean?
You know what? I mean, I get it. And people are typing into a little comment box on Facebook, but there's not a whole lot of detail there. I'd love more information as to why you think Ottawa is screwed. What's really, because the topic obviously right now is municipal politics. So what is it exactly that makes you feel that Ottawa is screwed? Is it the LRT? Is it the fact that we've got the three leaders for mayor right now, they're talking about such different things, from where I sit. I mean, Mark Sutcliffe the other day brought up dog parks. That's the new big thing.
Yeah.
More dog parks.
I haven't heard anybody asking for more dog parks. That's the first time I've heard of that. I mean, I've heard of dog parks, but I didn't know that was an issue for very many people.
Well, I wonder if that's born of the fact that during the pandemic, so many people were home and have time for pets that they didn't have time for before. Maybe there's a growing need. Now, I'm kind of blind to that because I live right near Conroy Pit, and I bought the house here because it's within walking distance to Conroy Pit. And to my knowledge, as someone who grew up in the West End, right next to Bruce Pit, and now lives in the East End, right next to Conroy Pit, my understanding was that those were really the only two off-leash dog parks in the city, but that's not the case at all. Robert Bartlett Park, for those in the South End, Riverside South, is a fantastic off-leash dog area, and it runs right along the river as well. And I only discovered it because when I had a boat, I was up and down the Rita River, and you would see dogs running in and out of the river all the time. But I have become aware that there are certain places in the city, and you see it if you're driving along the Queensway, especially if you're westbound. Is it Carling or no, near Island Park? There's a fenced off dog area there that's visible from the Queensway.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. I've seen that too. Yes.
Jamie's asking if I will stay longer than 2:30 once Lowell finally gets through. Jamie, if Lowell's even still trying, I suspect Lowell has probably given up the ghost and is probably sitting down having turkey leftovers. And if I was Lowell Green, I would probably be doing that as well. Craig says, perhaps Kelly's referring to the likely new mayor. McKenney is a socialist and a spendthrift individual. Well, perhaps Kelly is. I have not received a response from Kelly yet. I'd like to, though. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I really haven't looked much into Catherine McKenney. I certainly know Bob Shirelli's track record. And I say this openly. Mark Sutcliffe and I have been colleagues for a number of years. I have helped him, offered technical assistance to his podcast. I am well aware of Mark Sutcliffe and who he is. So I do have a little studying to do on Catherine McKenney. But, the environment to me right now, we've got bigger fish to fry. We really do. That's the environment's a nice to have. And I think if each of us sort of do things that we feel are right regarding the environment, we will get ourselves to a much better place. Richard says, John, don't forget the commercial for your sponsor, Shields, says Carrie. All right. Well, folks, I've never been to Shields, but here has been my experience. Working with Lowell, every single time he mentions Shields, it sticks with you. And when I do have conversations with folks, my next door neighbor, for example, his daughter just bought a house recently and was going to be months and months waiting for their appliances. And I recommended, listen, I hear great things about this Shields in Pakenham. You need to, consider them. And when you follow them on social media, you become abundantly aware of just what kind of business they're running. When you walk into a big box store, and they've got the appliances on the floor, and that's all well and good, but they're on the floor. They're not necessarily in your house. Shields is different. When, if it's on the floor, they've got it in store for you. At least that's been the experience that I have been made aware of, and person after person after person who sends emails to the show. And by the way, I see the emails who have done business with Shields have absolutely glowing reviews. Look, Pakenham is not that far from the city. It really isn't. Once you're beyond Canada, Pakenham, Almont, Arnprior are right there. Great folks at Shields, locally owned. Shields.ca. How did I do there, folks?
Pretty good, John.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. We should also mention, by the way, that you are a Red Blacks fan. How do you feel about that win yesterday?
I'm a big Red Blacks fan, and I was here at my computer at home doing some stuff, working on the campaign, actually answering emails and things, and I totally forgot to turn on the TV, which is probably a good thing because I had campaign stuff to do. But when I saw online that the team won, I was so happy.
Yeah, me too. I only saw the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, Chris, and I've been pulling my hair out, just like, why am I doing this? And I've been openly critical of not just the product in the field is one thing. Look, I've sat through a lot of really bad football teams over the years.
Me too.
Yeah, the Gleavermans, the Horn Chens. If I can survive that, I can live with a couple of years of bad football. But to me, it's the overall environment. It's not what it was. And I feel really let down by it. And I've been really sort of contemplating going forward as a season ticket holder. And then along comes that win yesterday. And all of a sudden I'm like, yeah. So you're saying there's a chance?
I picked up the Ottawa Sun today. I was going through it, and the sports writer mentioned, he says, no, there's a chance that the Red Blacks could make the playoffs. If they win the next couple of games, they could actually catch Hamilton and get that third playoff spot. I'm thinking, wow, that makes things interesting now, doesn't it?
It really does. And I mean, the fact that we play Montreal again and then back-to-back games against Hamilton, who, we're only 2 points behind. Only in the CFL, Chris, only in the CFL. I'd like to realign it and just, have the top five make it to a playoff situation. The bottom four are out. Anyway, I worked out a whole system. Because I saw that. Did you? Because I have all the time in the world to be sitting there noodling those kinds of things. Yeah. I have time to be fixing the CFL. When you're home alone for the long weekend, right. This is the kind of thing to do. Rick says, watched a short video on the Emergencies Act inquiry. Chrystia Freeland absolutely refused to give a direct answer. What good are our justice institutions if Trudeau's gang can flaunt the rules? Rick, I don't know, and I don't get it. And I'm right there with you anytime that I do tune into anything that is happening regarding the House of Commons, the non-answers. And it's a page right out of what we saw, in the Trump days in the States. If you got an answer at all, it didn't make any sense. Why are we not holding our politicians' feet to the fire and demanding answer the damn questions? I don't care if you like the question, but
yeah,
you are my servant. you are being paid by me to represent me and get information and give information, and you stand there dancing around it, and I mean, you might as well be answering in complete gibberish for all that matters. All right, to Ken.
Well, I remember years ago I was working at Public Works and Government Services Canada, and at one point our minister was Scott Bison, and he was talking to an audience of us workers, and he says, they call it question period, but it's question period, not answer period.
Wow. So you can ask the questions, but I don't have to answer. Technicality, I win. Ha ha. That's sad. Yes, folks, this is the Lowell Green Show. Lowell had some technical issues getting onto the show today. Not sure what's going on there, but rest assured, we will resolve them as we always do. I really suspect Lowell's computer is just on all the time, and it just needs a little reboot, and all will be well. And I know that Lowell's been doing a couple of other things, using other video platforms as well, and that may have confused things too. So I would help him more often if I could. The trick is Lowell is as far in the West End as you can go, with like just before Shields. There's Lowell's place, and I'm sort of out Chris's neck of the woods, just a little closer to Orleans than I am to Carp Mountain. So regarding the healthcare system, Ken says, yes, that's correct, John. It's the Canada Healthcare Transfer. What is the Canada Healthcare Transfer? He says the Canada Health Transfer, or CHT, is the largest major federal transfer to provinces and territories. It provides long-term, predictable funding for healthcare and supports the principles of the Canada Health Act. CHT payments are made on an equal per capita basis to provide comparable treatment for all Canadians, regardless of where they live. So there you go. It's a system of ensuring that our healthcare system right across the board is balanced. Hey, a new premier in Alberta. Is Alberta the new Quebec? Are we going to be dealing with, we're already dealing with yells and screams about, potential, separation plans from Alberta. What kind of situation does that put us in? Chris, your feeling?
Alberta is, they used to call it the economic engine of the country, along with Ontario. But a lot of Canadians don't seem to realize that the better Alberta does, the better it is for the rest of the country. We are a country with natural resources, and we should be using that to our advantage, not just for Canadians, but on the world stage. We could be helping those European countries like Germany right now with their energy shortage. They're depending on the Russians, and we don't want them having to depend on the Russians. So there are a lot of reasons why we need to support Alberta and make sure that our resource energy is strong for the future.
I agree, but what kind of situation does that put us in if Alberta decides to, create a political poop storm and, start yelling and screaming about separatism? Is that to their advantage or disadvantage? As far as we can't get our natural resources beyond Ontario. Quebec won't allow it. We can't get it to the East Coast. If you've been to the Maritimes, and I have, I've got, my in-laws are in New Brunswick, so I'm there a lot. And it wasn't until, I started having these conversations with Lowell, I was completely in the dark about that. I just sort of thought every home in New Brunswick it was just more convenient for them to have electric heat. But no, it's because they cannot get our own natural gas from our own country. Can you imagine? We knit a sweater. Right. We knit sweaters at Sweaters R Us in Flin Flon, Manitoba. But we can't get them to the East Coast because Quebec won't allow it. Yeah. Like there's things that are readily available, made here in Canada. They're in our ground, like you said, natural resource, and we are denying tax-paying citizens in one of the coldest climates in the world the opportunity to have that natural gas. And then, as you just articulated, it creates an even bigger problem. If we can't get it to port, and our East Coast is the closest port to places like Ukraine and Germany and, all of Europe, how the hell do we sell it? Who do we sell it to? Ourselves.
Exactly.
I don't want to be my own customer. Do you want to be your own customer?
No, I want the resources to be shared, and as you say, why should people on the East Coast not be able to have the same resources that we have? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. So, does that put Alberta in a better situation to negotiate with Quebec if they're doing it on their own as an independent country or nation or however they want to, label themselves? What's Canada's role in that, I wonder?
It's going to be a lot of posturing now because we have a new leader in Alberta and we have the same leader in Quebec. But Mr. Legault, he's in the driver's seat now because for the next election, the Prime Minister has to make sure that he doesn't step out of line with what Legault wants.
Some comments on this. Darlene says, need to work with Alberta and for Quebec. I'm getting sick of their policies. Let them separate, please. Anne says, I'm glad Danielle Smith won in Alberta. I felt a good feeling when Poilievre won the Conservative Party leadership. So she's liking the Conservative movement that is seems to be getting a lot of the attention across the country. Alberta's always been quite conservative anyway. But that's a first time for that party, though. Governing, yes, I believe so. The interprovincial border trading restrictions are killing the Canadian economy, says Ken. We need free trade within Canada, says Peter. Isn't that sad? You're absolutely right. Regarding the mayoral race, Chris Robert says Mayor McKenney will make Jim Watson look like Ezra Levant. And Rick says the German chancellor asked Trudeau for help, and Trudeau offered hydrogen power, which we have none of, and as many challenges away. Is that for real? Doesn't surprise me one little bit. Folks, and Chris, thanks for calling in. I know I've got an email from you, Chris. I do need to reply to that. I guess at this point, you've done me a solid. I need to do you a solid regarding your email. I'm just going to say yes. We'll work out the details. I'll get back to you by email in a little bit. So thanks for having my back today, Chris. I appreciate it. Chris Fraser is a candidate for Orleans Ward 2. He'll be knocking on your door if he hasn't already, but do yourself a favor with the election coming up. Look into who your candidates are. Ask them, email them, get in touch with them via their social media channels. Ask them their position on some of the things that matter to you. Things like incineration, things like the LRT, things like bike lanes, things like the ambulance situation. Ask them who they're supporting for mayor and why. Ask them about this environmental plan that we've talked about on this show. That, is apparently a thing without being a thing because nobody voted for the thing that isn't a thing, but is a thing according to some of the things I've read, if that makes sense. Chris, thank you so much. To the audience,
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for suffering through this with me. My first time hosting the Lowell Green Show on my own.
You did a great job.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks. The check's in the mail. All right, I appreciate you, buddy. Yes, for Lowell Green, I am John Milkey. We will have Lowell back tomorrow. Now, where is that sign-off button that I always miss? See, things are at least consistent. I miss it with Lowell. I miss it with me, too. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.